The sound of shattering glass is distinct. It cuts through the bass of the music, through the laughter, and through the soul of anyone trying to remain invisible. But in Chicago's underworld, silence is far louder than noise. When a tray of crystal tumblers hit the floor of the gilded cage, the music didn't stop because of the mess. It stopped because of who saw it happen. A power-tripping manager thought he was teaching a lesson to a helpless waitress. He didn't realize he was signing his own death warrant in front of the city's most dangerous kingpin. This is the story of how a spilled drink started a war. The Gilded Cage wasn't just a nightclub. It was a fortress of vice, disguised as a high-end lounge on West Kinsey Street. The air inside smelled of expensive cologne, desperation, and ozone. For Eustacia Corves, it smelled like survival. It was her third shift. Her feet, crammed into heels a size too small, throbbed in rhythm with the deep house music vibrating through the floorboards. She adjusted the satin sash of her uniform, a ridiculous, skimpy thing that made her feel more like a garnish than a human being, and lifted the heavy brass tray. "Move it, Corvus. You're not getting paid to model the merchandise. You're here to serve it," a voice sneered behind her. Eustacia didn't need to turn around to visualize the face of Derek Hogan. The floor manager was a man composed entirely of grease and insecurity. He was 40, balding but fighting it with bad dye, and possessed a Napoleonic complex that made him terrorize the support staff. "I'm going, Derek," Eustacia said, keeping her voice level. She couldn't afford to snap. The medical bills on her kitchen counter were a terrifying mountain of white paper. Her brother, Toby, needed the next round of treatment, and the tips at the Gilded Cage were the only thing keeping the wolves from the door. "Sir! It's Sir, or Mr. Hogan," Derek corrected, stepping into her personal space. He smelled of stale tobacco and peppermint. "And smile. You look like a funeral director." Eustacia forced a tight, plastic smile onto her face. "Right away, Mr. Hogan." She pushed past him, navigating the sea of bodies. The club was packed tonight. It was Friday in Chicago, and the city's elite were out to drown their secrets in liquor that cost more than Eustacia's monthly rent. She had an order for the VIP booth in the back corner, Section Alpha. It was the only area of the club shrouded in heavy velvet curtains, separated from the common rabble by a thick red rope and a security guard who looked like he ate concrete for breakfast. The order was simple but specific. 2 fingers of Louis XIII, neat. 1 glass of sparkling water with a twist of lime. No ice. Eustacia balanced the tray, her wrists aching. As she approached the VIP section, the crowd thickened. A group of investment bankers were celebrating a merger, spilling into the aisle. "Excuse me," Eustacia murmured, trying to slide through a gap. She was almost clear when she felt it. A hand on her lower back, not guiding, but shoving. It was sudden and sharp. Eustacia pitched forward. Time seemed to dilate. She tried to correct her balance, but her heel caught on the edge of the plush carpet. She went down hard. The brass tray left her hand, launching the crystal glass of Louis XIII into the air. Crash! The sound was violent. The cognac splashed across the pristine Italian leather shoes of a man standing near the booth's entrance. The crystal shattered into 1,000 diamond-like shards across the dark floor. Eustacia hit the ground with a thud, her knees taking the brunt of the impact. A jagged piece of glass sliced her palm as she instinctively tried to catch herself. The music seemed to screech to a halt in her head, though the bass kept thumping. "You stupid cow." Derek Hogan was there instantly, as if he had been waiting for this moment. He'd loomed over her, his face flushed a mottled red. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't check the guest. He saw an opportunity to exert dominance. "Look what you did!" Derek screamed, his voice cracking. He grabbed Eustacia by the upper arm, his fingers digging into her bruised flesh, hauling her up roughly. "That is a $4,000 paw, you incompetent trash." I was pushed," Eustacia stammered, wincing as blood dripped from her hand onto the floor. "Derek, please, you pushed me." "Liar!" Derek shook her. "I saw you trip over your own clumsy feet. You're drunk, aren't you? Drinking on the job?" "No, I haven't." "Shut up!" Derek raised a hand, not to strike, but to silence, his palm hovering inches from her face. The threat was clear. "You are fired. You hear me? Get your things and get the hell out. You'll be paying for that cognac for the rest of your miserable life." Tears pricked Eustacia's eyes, not from sadness, but from a burning, molten rage. She needed this job. She needed the money for Toby. She couldn't lose this. "Please," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. "I can work it off. Don't fire me." "Too late," Derek sneered. He looked around, performing for the nearby patrons, playing the role of the diligent manager handling a problem. "Get out before I have security throw you out." He shoved her again, towards the exit. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The voice was low, baritone, and calm. It didn't shout, yet it carried more weight than the blaring speakers. It came from the shadows of Section Alpha. Derek froze. He turned his head slowly toward the booth. A man was sitting there. He hadn't moved when the glass shattered. He hadn't flinched when the cognac splashed near him. He was leaning back in the leather booth, one hand resting casually on the knee of his dark trousers, the other toying with a heavy gold lighter. He was dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his broad frame with architectural precision. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of a stormy sea, grey, cold, and currently locked onto Derek Hogan. "Excuse me, sir." Derek's voice trembled slightly. "I'm just handling a personnel issue. This waitress is drunk and disorderly. She ruined your evening." "She didn't ruin my evening," the man said, standing up. He was tall, towering. As he stepped out of the shadows, the light caught the sharp angle of his jaw and the scar that ran faintly through his left eyebrow. "You did," the man finished. Derek laughed nervously. "Sir, I saw her trip. She's clumsy. I'm protecting the club's reputation." The man took a step forward. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He ignored Derek entirely and looked down at Eustacia. His eyes dropped to her bleeding hand, then back to her face. "Did you trip?" he asked her. Eustacia looked up. She was trembling, holding her bleeding hand against her chest. She looked at Derek, whose eyes were bulging with a silent threat. Then she looked at the stranger. There was something terrifying about him, but also something strangely anchoring. "No," Eustacia said, her voice shaking. "I was pushed." The stranger nodded once. He turned his gaze back to Derek. "I saw you shove her," the man said casually. "I was watching you follow her across the floor. You waited until she was off balance and you pushed her." That's absurd," Derek sputtered. "Do you know who runs this place? I am the manager. I decide what happens here. You're just a guest. You don't get to—" The man didn't shout. He simply moved. It was a blur of motion. One moment Derek was standing. The next, he was pinned against the velvet wall of the booth, the man's forearm pressed against his windpipe. Derek clawed at the arm, his feet dangling inches off the floor. "A guest?" the man whispered, leaning in close. "You think I'm a guest?" A massive figure stepped out from behind the man, a bodyguard, built like a tank, with a shaved head. He leaned in and spoke to Derek, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Mr. Hogan," the bodyguard said, "you are currently being choked by Dorian Vane." Derek's face went from red to a terrifying shade of purple. His eyes widened in absolute horror. Dorian Vane. The name was a ghost story in Chicago. He wasn't just a Mafia boss, he was the head of the Vane syndicate. He owned the shipping yards, the unions, the luxury hotels, and through a shell company, he had purchased the Gilded Cage 3 days ago. Derek had just assaulted an employee in front of the new owner. Dorian released the pressure slightly, letting Derek gasp for air, but didn't let him go. "I don't like bullies, Derek," Dorian said softly. "And I certainly don't like men who put their hands on women." Derek Hogan slid down the wall like a wet towel when Dorian finally released him. He coughed violently, clutching his throat, looking up at Dorian with the eyes of a cornered rat. "Mr. Vane, I didn't know," Derek wheezed. "Please, it was a mistake. I was stressed. The numbers. I was just trying to maintain standards." Dorian adjusted his cuffs, his expression one of utter boredom, mixed with distaste. He didn't look at Derek. He looked at his bodyguard. "Leo, remove him." "Remove him from the floor, boss?" Leo asked. "Remove him from the payroll," Dorian corrected, "and ensure he never works in a venue within the city limits of Chicago again. If I see his face or hear his name, I will hold you personally responsible." "Understood." Leo grabbed Derek by the back of his cheap suit jacket and dragged him away. Derek's protests were drowned out as the heavy security doors swallowed him. The silence in the VIP section was heavy. The few other patrons in the booth, business associates of Dorian, were staring at their drinks, smart enough to pretend nothing had happened. Dorian turned his attention back to Eustacia. She was still on the floor, though she had managed to gather her legs under her. She was pressing a cocktail napkin to her palm, which was rapidly soaking through with bright red blood. Dorian extended a hand. Eustacia hesitated. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew who Dorian Vane was. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. You didn't talk to Vane men. You didn't look at them. And you certainly didn't let them help you up. But the pain in her hand was blinding, and the authority radiating from him was magnetic. She reached out. His hand was large, warm, and calloused. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, but he didn't let go immediately. He held her wrist, inspecting the wound. "You need stitches," he stated clinically. "I'm fine," Eustacia lied, pulling her hand back. "I have a first aid kit in the locker room. I just need to clean it up and, well, I guess I'm fired anyway." "You aren't fired," Dorian said. "Derek is fired. You, however, are bleeding on my floor." "I'm sorry about the cognac, Mr. Vane. I can pay for it in installments." Dorian actually laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "The cognac is insured. Your hand is not." "Leo." The bodyguard, having deposited the trash outside, had returned. "Boss, bring the car around. We're going to Dr. Aris." "No!" Eustacia backed away, panic rising. "I can't go with you. I have to get home." "My brother." Dorian paused. He studied her face, cataloguing the fear in her eyes. It wasn't just the fear of a Mafia don. It was the frantic, weary fear of someone carrying too much weight. He saw the frayed edges of her uniform, the dark circles under her amber eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "You have a brother?" Dorian asked. "Yes, and I can't be at a hospital. I can't afford the wait time or the bill." "Dr. Aris is a private physician. There is no bill, and there is no wait," Dorian said. "And if you walk out that door with an open wound, you'll likely get an infection in this city. Then who takes care of your brother?" It was a low blow, using her brother against her. But it worked. Eustacia slumped. He was right. If she got sick, Toby was alone. "Fine," she whispered. The ride was silent. The interior of Dorian's Maybach smelled of leather and cedar. Eustacia sat as close to the door as possible, clutching a throbbing hand. Dorian sat on the other side, typing on a phone, seemingly ignoring her. But he wasn't. Dorian Vane was a man who survived by noticing details. He noticed her shoes were worn out. He noticed the tremor in her hands wasn't just from shock, but likely low blood sugar. He noticed she didn't have a coat, despite it being January in Chicago. They arrived at a discreet townhouse in Lincoln Park. Dr. Aris, a calm Greek man who asked no questions, stitched Eustatia's hand in under 20 minutes. When they emerged back onto the street, the snow had started to fall. "Where do you live?" Dorian asked, standing by the open car door. "I can take the bus from here," Eustacia said, shivering in her thin waitress uniform. Dorian took off his suit jacket. It was heavy wool, lined with silk, and still held his body heat. He draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. It swallowed her small frame. "I'm not asking for the sake of conversation, Eustacia," he said, using her name for the first time. "I'm taking you home." She gave him the address, a crumbling tenement building in the Lower West Side, miles away from the luxury of Lincoln Park. When the car pulled up to the curb, the neighborhood was dark. Streetlights were broken. Graffiti covered the brickwork. It was a place where hope went to die. "Thank you," Eustacia said softly, handing him back the jacket. "For the doctor. And for stopping Derek." "Keep the jacket," Dorian said. "It's freezing." "I can't take your—" "Keep it." She nodded, clutching the lapels tight. "Goodbye, Mr. Vane." She hurried out of the car and into the building, disappearing behind the rusted security door. Dorian watched her go. He waited until he saw a light flick on in a third-floor window. "Leo," Dorian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Yeah, Dom? Find out everything about her. Who she is, who the brother is, and exactly how much debt she's in." "You think she's a plant?" Leo asked, glancing at the building. "No," Dorian said, watching the silhouette move across the window shade. "I think she's leverage, but I don't know for who yet. And I want to know why a woman like that is working in a pit like the Gilded Cage. And Derek?" "Derek is a loose end," Dorian said coldly. "Keep an eye on him. Men like that don't learn lessons. They just look for smaller victims, or bigger allies." Dorian was right. Miles away, in a dive bar on the south side, Derek Hogan was nursing a split lip and a bruised ego. He was on his fourth whiskey, his hands shaking with rage. He pulled out his phone. He scrolled past the contacts of bartenders and bouncers until he reached a number he had sworn never to call. It was labeled simply Russo. The Russo family were the Vane Syndicate's only real rivals. They were brutal, messy, and hungry for territory. Derek hit dial. "Yeah?" a voice answered. "I have something for you," Derek spat into the phone. "I know where Dorian Vane is vulnerable, and I know how to get to him." "I'm listening," the voice said. "He's got a new pet, a waitress. He fired me over her. He took her home personally." And, Derek smiled, his teeth stained with blood. "I know where she lives, and I know she owes money. A lot of it." "Name?" "Eustacia Corvez." The following morning, the sun struggled to pierce the grime of the windows in Eustacia's apartment. It was a one-bedroom box that smelled of damp plaster and boiled cabbage from the neighbor downstairs. Eustacia sat at the tiny kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills. The largest one was from St. Jude's, Toby's oncology treatment. The number at the bottom was 5 figures long. Beside it lay the termination notice from the Gilded Cage. Derek hadn't just fired her. He had blacklisted her in the system before Dorian had dragged him out. She had received a text from her agency at 3:00 a.m. saying her contract was void. Elle? A weak voice drifted from the bedroom. Eustacia swept the bills into a drawer and plastered a smile on her face before walking in. Toby was 16, but looked 12. The chemotherapy had stripped him of his hair and his weight, leaving him fragile and pale against the grey sheets. "Hey, buddy," Eustacia said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I went 10 rounds with Tyson." Toby cracked a dry smile. "Did you work late?" "Yeah, late shift," Eustacia lied. She smoothed the blanket. "But the tips were good. You look tired, Elle. You should sleep. I'm fine. I'm going to make us some oatmeal, and then I have to go out for a bit. Job interview." Toby frowned. "I thought you liked the club." "Management change," she said quickly. "New place pays better." An hour later, Eustacia was walking down the cracked pavement of 18th Street, clutching her coat, Dorian's coat. She hadn't returned it. It was the warmest thing she owned. And in a strange way, wearing it made her feel protected. She was heading to a diner where she heard they needed a dishwasher. It was a step down, but she needed cash immediately. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly alongside her. Eustacia's heart skipped a beat. She gripped her purse strap, walking faster. The car matched her pace. The passenger window rolled down. It wasn't a thug, it was Leo, the shaved-head giant from the night before. "Ms. Corves," Leo said. "Get in." "I'm busy," Eustacia said, keeping her eyes forward. "I don't have time for whatever this is." "Boss wants to talk to you." "Tell him thanks for the doctor, but I don't fraternize with customers. Especially," she trailed off, "especially Mafia dons." "He's not asking," Leo said. The locks on the back door clicked open with a loud thunk. "And it's about your brother." Eustacia stopped dead. The cold wind whipped her hair across her face. She turned to look at Leo. "What about Toby?" "Get in, Miss Corves." She got in. The drive took them out of the city, toward the North Shore, where the houses were estates, and the driveways were longer than her entire street. They pulled up to a massive modern mansion made of glass and steel, perched on a cliff overlooking Lake Michigan. Leo escorted her into a study that was bigger than her entire apartment. The walls were lined with books and art that probably cost more than her life's earnings. Dorian Vane was standing by the window, looking out at the grey water. He turned when she entered. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He wore a black cashmere sweater and dark jeans. It made him look younger, but no less dangerous. "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing to a silver service on the desk. "How do you know about Toby?" Eustacia asked, ignoring the coffee. Her voice was tight. Dorian picked up a manila folder from his desk and tossed it down. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped in front of her. "I know everything, Eustacia. I know about the acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I know you're 3 months behind on rent. I know you owe $4,000 to a loan shark named Knuckles in Cicero. And I know you were fired from your last 3 jobs because you had to leave early to take Toby to chemo." Eustacia felt violated. Her hands shook as she touched the folder. "You had me investigated? Why?" "Because I don't like puzzles I can't solve," Dorian said, walking around the desk. He leaned against the edge, crossing his arms. "You are a woman drowning, Eustacia, and you're too proud to grab a life raft." "I'm handling it," she snapped. "No, you aren't. You're sinking. And when you sink, Toby sinks." The mention of her brother's name in his mouth made her flinch. "What do you want from me? I don't have money. I don't have connections. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody. You're resilient. You stood up to Derek when most men would have cowered. You took a fall to protect a $4,000 bottle of cognac, even though you were being assaulted." Dorian paused. I need someone like that. For what? Running drugs? Honey-trapping rivals? Eustacia asked cynically. Dorian's eyes narrowed. I have soldiers for that. I need a house manager. Eustacia blinked. A what? My estate. Dorian gestured around him. It requires discretion. The staff I hire from agencies talk too much. They sell stories to the tabloids or information to my enemies. I fired my last head of staff 2 days ago for planting a listening device in my library. He stepped closer to her. The scent of sandalwood and expensive tobacco filled her senses. I need someone I can trust, someone who owes me, someone who has everything to lose. You want to buy my loyalty, Eustacia realized. I want to rent it, Dorian corrected. Here is the offer. You move in here. There is a guest cottage on the grounds, fully furnished, 2 bedrooms. You bring Toby. I have a private medical suite set up here for my business injuries. It is better equipped than St. Jude's. I will hire a private nurse for him. All his medical bills will be paid. Eustacia's mouth went dry. It was a fantasy. It was the answer to every prayer she had whispered into her pillow at night. And in return, she whispered, you run my house. You manage the staff, the kitchen, the events. You keep my life organized. And most importantly, you see nothing, you hear nothing, and you say nothing. Whatever happens in this house stays in this house. It was a deal with the devil. She knew that. Dorian Vane was a criminal. Living here would put her in the center of a world of violence. But then she thought of Toby sleeping in that drafty apartment, shivering under thin blankets. She thought of the loan shark in Cicero who had threatened to break her fingers next week if she didn't pay. Why me? She asked. Why not just hire another professional? Dorian looked at her, his grey eyes softening for a fraction of a second. Because you didn't ask for help, you just bled quietly. I respect that. He held out a pen. 2 years, Dorian said. Commit to 2 years. After that, Toby's treatment should be finished, and you'll walk away with a substantial severance. Debt-free. Eustacia looked at the pen. She looked at Dorian. She thought of the cold wind outside and the warm fire in this room. She took the pen. 2 weeks later, life had changed so drastically that Eustacia felt like she was living in a dream. The guest cottage was beautiful, a stone structure covered in ivy, with heated floors and a kitchen stocked with organic food. Toby was already looking better. The private nurse, a stern but kind woman named Martha, handled his meds. He was gaining weight. He was smiling again. Eustacia's job was demanding but manageable. She organized Dorian's schedule, oversaw the cleaning crews, and managed the kitchen staff. She learned quickly that Dorian was a man of strict routine. Coffee at 6 a.m., meetings in the library until noon. He hated red roses. They reminded him of funerals, and preferred the curtains in the West Wing, drawn by 4:00 p.m. She saw him rarely, usually just passing in the hallways. He was always polite, but distant. The intense, magnetic connection she had felt at the club was buried under layers of professional courtesy. But the outside world hadn't forgotten her. It was a Tuesday. Eustacia had to go into the city to pick up a specific herbal supplement Toby liked from a Chinatown apothecary, something the private doctors didn't carry. She took one of the estate cars, a modest sedan Dorian kept for staff use. Leo had insisted she take a driver, but Eustacia had refused. She needed to feel independent, even for an hour. She parked in a garage on Wentworth Avenue. The air was crisp, smelling of roasted duck and car exhaust. She felt light, happy for the first time in years. As she walked back to the car, swinging the plastic bag, she heard footsteps echoing behind her. Eustacia stopped. The garage was dimly lit, the concrete stained with oil. She turned around. "Hello, Eustacia." Derek Hogan stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. He looked terrible. His cheap suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a jittery, manic energy. "Derek," Eustacia said, her stomach dropping. She took a step back, reaching for her phone. "Get away from me." "You landed on your feet, didn't you?" Derek spat, stepping closer. "From spilling drinks to living in the Vane estate. Who did you have to sleep with? The bodyguard? Or the boss himself? I'm warning you, Derek. I'll call the police." "The police?" Derek laughed, a high, ragged sound. "You work for Dorian Vane now. You can't call the police. That's the rules, isn't it?" Two men stepped out from the shadows behind Derek. They weren't like Derek. They were professionals. Leather jackets, dead eyes, hands in their pockets. These were Russo men. Eustacia backed up until she hit the side of her car. "What do you want?" "We want a conversation," said the taller of the two men. He had a scar running down his neck. "Mr. Russo wants to know about Vane's security protocols. He wants to know the schedule." I don't know anything," Eustacia stammered. "Liar!" Derek lunged forward, grabbing her wrist, the same one she had cut. He twisted it. "You run the house. You see everything. You're going to tell us when the shift changes are. You're going to tell us where he sleeps." "Let me go," Eustacia screamed, dropping the bag. "You're going to put a bug in his office," the scar-necked man said calmly. "And if you don't, we know where your brother is. That cottage is nice, but it's not a fortress. A fire could happen. Accidents happen." The threat to Toby turned Eustacia's blood to ice. The fear evaporated, replaced by the same protective fury she had felt at the club. She stomped on Derek's foot with her heel as hard as she could. Derek howled and let go. Eustacia scrambled for the driver's side door, fumbling for the keys. "Grab her!" the scar-necked man barked. Derek lunged again, grabbing Eustacia by her hair. She screamed as he yanked her back. She slammed against the car, the breath knocked out of her. "You bitch!" Derek hissed, raising a fist. Suddenly, a roar filled the garage. Tires screeched. A sleek black sports car drifted around the corner, engine revving like a demon. It didn't slow down. It accelerated straight towards them. The Russo men dove out of the way. Derek, slow and stupid, froze. The car slammed on the brakes inches from Derek's knees, the bumper nudging him hard enough to knock him onto his backside. The driver's door flew open. Dorian Vane stepped out. He wasn't calm today. He was a storm. He held a suppressed pistol in his right hand, pointing it directly at the ground. But his eyes were blazing with a violence that made the Russo thugs hesitate. "I thought I told you," Dorian said, his voice echoing in the concrete chamber, "that if I saw your face again, you were dead." Derek scrambled backward on his hands and feet, like a crab. "Mr. Vane, it wasn't me. They made me." The two Russo men drew their weapons, but they were too slow. Fot, fot. 2 shots. Dorian didn't aim to kill. He aimed to maim. The scar-necked man screamed, dropping his gun and clutching his knee. The second man fired a wild shot that pinged off the concrete ceiling before diving behind a van. Dorian didn't flinch at the gunfire. He walked over to Eustacia, placing himself between her and the shooters. "Get in the car," he ordered, not looking at her. "Now." "Dorian, get in the car!" Eustacia scrambled into the passenger seat of his sports car. Dorian turned back to Derek, who was sobbing on the ground. Dorian holstered his weapon and looked at the Russo thug bleeding on the floor. "Tell Enzo Russo," Dorian said, his voice loud enough to carry, "that if he comes near my staff again, I won't send warnings. I'll send his brother's head in a box." He looked down at Derek. "And you," Dorian said softly. "You just ran out of luck." Dorian raised his boot and kicked Derek square in the face. Derek went limp. Dorian turned, slid into the driver's seat, and slammed the door. He shifted gears and the car roared out of the garage, leaving the chaos behind. Eustacia sat in the passenger seat, trembling violently. Her hands were gripping her knees. "You followed me," she whispered. "I track all the estate cars," Dorian said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "When you stopped in a garage for 20 minutes, I knew something was wrong. You don't drive. You take the train. They wanted me to spy on you. They threatened Toby." Dorian's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed in his temple. "I know," he said. "This is my fault. I brought you into the light, and the wolves saw you." He glanced over at her, seeing the red mark on her cheek where Derek had grabbed her. The cold distance was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by a burning, possessive anger. "It won't happen again," Dorian vowed. "From now on, you don't go anywhere without me. You belong to the house now, Eustacia, and I protect what is mine." For the first time, Eustacia didn't feel like an employee. She felt like something else, something precious, and looking at the man who had just engaged in a gunfight to save her, she realized with a jolt of terror that she didn't want him to stop. The drive back to the estate was performed in silence, but the air inside the car was thick enough to choke on. Dorian drove with a terrifying precision, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. When they pulled up to the front gate, the security team was already waiting. Leo stood by the entrance, an assault rifle strapped to his chest. The house manager job had officially turned into a war zone deployment. Dorian parked the car and killed the engine. He didn't move immediately. He took a deep breath, his hands sliding off the wheel. "Are you hurt?" Eustacia asked, her voice small. She was still shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. "No," Dorian said. He turned to look at her. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone. "Go to the cottage. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me or Leo. I have to debrief the team." "Dorian, go, Eustacia." It was an order, cold and sharp. Eustacia obeyed. She ran to the cottage, checking on Toby. He was asleep, blissfully unaware that his sister had just been in a shootout. She sat in the dark living room for hours, staring at the door, clutching a kitchen knife she had pulled from the drawer. It was past midnight when the knock came. "Eustacia, it's me." She unlocked the door. Dorian was standing there. He had changed out of his blood-spattered clothes into a fresh shirt and slacks, but he looked exhausted. The invincibility he wore like armor was cracking. "Can I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. He walked in, bringing the scent of the cold night air and whiskey with him. He didn't sit. He paced the small living room, running a hand through his hair. "I'm doubling the security on Toby," Dorian said abruptly, "and I'm moving you both into the main house tonight. The cottage is too exposed." "Dorian, stop," Eustacia said, placing the knife on the table. "Talk to me." He stopped pacing and looked at her. "I almost got you killed today. You saved me. I put you in the line of fire." Dorian's voice rose, a crack of thunder in the quiet room. "If I hadn't been tracking the car, if I had been 5 minutes late, Derek would have given you to Enzo. Do you know what Enzo does to people?" He turned away, looking at the dark window. "I thought I could keep you separate," he confessed, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "I thought I could have a piece of my life that was just clean, normal. A manager who organizes my schedule and makes sure my coffee is hot. But I poison everything I touch." Eustacia walked over to him. She hesitated, then placed a hand on his back. His muscles were coiled tight as steel cables. "You didn't poison my life, Dorian," she said softly. "You saved it. Before you, I was drowning. I was going to lose Toby. I was going to lose everything. Today was scary, yes, but I'm not leaving. Dorian turned slowly. He looked down at her, his grey eyes searching her face for any sign of deception. He found none. You should leave, he said. I should give you $1 million and put you on a plane to Switzerland. And who would make sure you eat dinner? Eustacia tried to joke, though her eyes were wet. Who would stop you from firing the maids for dusting too loudly? Dorian didn't smile. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed over the skin, a touch so gentle it contradicted the violence of the man. I have never been afraid of anything, Dorian murmured. I have stared down guns, judges, and rivals. But seeing you cornered in that garage, it terrified me. The space between them vanished. It wasn't a sudden collision, but a gravitational pull. Dorian leaned down, and Eustacia rose on her tiptoes. When his lips touched hers, it wasn't tentative. It was desperate. It was the kiss of a man claiming the only thing that kept him tethered to his humanity. Eustacia kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair, pouring all her gratitude and confusion and rising desire into him. He groaned low in his throat, pulling her waist flush against him. The kiss deepened, tasting of whiskey and danger. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was only the heat of his body and the frantic beating of their hearts. Dorian pulled back first, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. I can't let you go now, he whispered, sounding almost defeated. You know that, right? I can't let you leave. I don't want to go, Eustacia replied. Then you need to be ready, Dorian said, stepping back, his eyes hardening again, not at her but at the world. Because Enzo Russo just declared war, and I'm going to burn his empire to the ground for touching you. The war didn't start with bombs. It started with whispers. Over the next week, Dorian was a phantom. He spent his days in the war room of the estate, surrounded by lieutenants. Eustacia, moved into the master suite's guest wing in the main house, continued her duties. But the atmosphere was suffocating. Toby was thrilled, thinking they were just upgrading their rooms. He spent his days playing video games in the home theater, oblivious to the armed guards patrolling the perimeter. On Friday, Dorian found Eustacia in the library. He was holding a black velvet box and an envelope. We have to go out, he said. Eustacia looked up from her ledger. Is that safe? It's necessary. The mayor is holding his annual charity ball at the Frantic Hall. Every major player in the city will be there. Politicians, judges, and the Russos. And you're going? If I don't go, it looks like I'm weak. It looks like I'm hiding, Dorian explained. I need to show them that I am untouchable. He slid the box across the desk. And I need you with me. Eustacia opened the box. Inside lay a necklace of diamonds and rubies that glittered like crystallized blood. Dorian, I can't wear this. I'm the housekeeper. Tonight, you are not the housekeeper. You are my date. And more importantly, you are the message. What message? That I keep what is mine. The transformation was startling. A team of stylists, brought in under blindfolds, prepared her. When Eustacia looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize herself. The dress was a deep, midnight blue silk that hugged her curves and pooled at her feet. The ruby necklace rested against her collarbone, cold and heavy. Dorian was waiting in the foyer. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. When he saw her descending the grand staircase, he went completely still. The soldiers by the door looked away, sensing the intensity of the moment. But Dorian just watched her, his eyes dark and hungry. You look... He trailed off, unable to find the word. He simply offered his arm. Stay close to me. Do not leave my side for a second. The charity ball was a sea of diamonds and hypocrisy. Under the crystal chandeliers, the city's corrupt elite drank champagne and pretended to be civilized. When Dorian and Eustacia entered, the room went quiet. The ripples of silence spread until the orchestra was the only thing audible. All eyes were on the King of Chicago and the stunning, unknown woman on his arm. They moved through the crowd. Dorian was charming, terrifyingly polite, introducing Eustacia simply as Eustacia. He didn't give her a title. The mystery made the gossip mongers frantic. Then, the crowd parted. Enzo Russo stood by the ice sculpture. He was older than Dorian, bloated with excess, wearing a white tuxedo that made him look like a mobster from a bad movie. But his eyes were shark-like. "Dorian," Enzo smiled, spreading his arms. "I didn't think you'd show. I heard you were having pest control issues." "The pests have been handled, Enzo," Dorian said smoothly, his hand tightening imperceptibly on Eustacia's waist. "Though some rats are harder to exterminate than others." Enzo's eyes flicked to Eustacia. He licked his lips. "And who is this lovely creature? Is this the waitress I heard about? The one Derek Hogan was so fond of?" Eustacia felt a chill run down her spine, but she lifted her chin. "My name is Eustacia Corvus, and Mr. Hogan is no longer employed." Enzo chuckled darkly. "A woman with a voice. Careful, Dorian. They bite." "I like the bite," Dorian said coldly. "Enjoy the party, Enzo. It might be your last." He steered Eustacia onto the dance floor. The orchestra began a waltz. Dorian pulled her close, his hand firm on her back. They moved in perfect synchronization, a bubble of intimacy in a room full of sharks. "He knows," Eustacia whispered. "He knows who I am." "He knows nothing," Dorian assured her. "He's trying to scare you. Look at me, just look at me." For a few minutes, it was magic. Eustacia forgot the danger. She was dancing with the man she was falling in love with. But the spell was broken by a vibration in Dorian's pocket. He checked his phone. His face went pale. "What is it?" Eustacia asked. "Leo just radioed. The perimeter at the estate has been breached." Eustacia's heart stopped. "Toby. Leo is with him. They are moving to the safe room. We have to go. Now." Dorian grabbed her hand, abandoning the waltz. They moved toward the exit, ignoring the confused stares. As they reached the lobby, the glass doors exploded. It wasn't a bomb. It was gunfire. Men in ski masks poured into the lobby, assault rifles raised. The guests inside the ballroom screamed. Dorian shoved Eustacia behind a marble pillar, drawing his gun from his shoulder holster in one fluid motion. "It's a trap," Dorian hissed. "The breach at the estate was a diversion to get us to leave the ballroom." Bullets chipped the marble above their heads. Dorian returned fire, dropping the lead gunman. "We need to get to the car," Dorian shouted over the noise. "Can you run in those heels?" "I'll run barefoot." Eustacia kicked off the expensive shoes. "On my mark. 3, 2. Dorian stepped out, firing 2 precise shots. "Go!" They sprinted across the lobby, glass crunching under Eustacia's feet. They burst out into the cool night air, expecting to see Leo and the car. Instead, they saw the black Maybach. The driver's side door was open. The driver was slumped over the wheel, dead, and standing by the rear door, holding a pistol, was a man Eustacia recognized. It wasn't a Russo soldier. It was Victor, Dorian's second-in-command. The man who had been in the library with them that morning. Dorian skidded to a halt, aiming his gun at Victor. But Victor didn't aim at Dorian. He aimed at Eustacia. "Drop it, Dom," Victor said, his voice shaking slightly. "Drop it or I put a bullet in her heart." "Victor!" Dorian roared, a sound of pure betrayal. "What have you done?" "Enzo pays better," Victor spat, "and he promised I'd run the north side. Drop the gun." Dorian looked at Eustacia. He looked at the gun pointed at her chest. The King of Chicago, the man who never surrendered, slowly lowered his weapon and let it clatter to the pavement. "Let her go, Victor. Take me." "No," a new voice said from the shadows. Enzo Russo stepped out from behind a van, flanked by 3 more men. Derek Hogan was with him, his face bandaged, looking gleeful. "We're taking both," Enzo grinned, "but the girl goes in the trunk." Derek stepped forward, grabbing Eustacia roughly. She fought, scratching at his bandages, but he hit her hard across the temple with the butt of a gun. The world went black. The last thing Eustacia heard was Dorian screaming her name as the Russo men swarmed him, beating him to the ground. The metallic tang of rust and old blood woke Eustacia. She was zip-tied to a steel chair in a cavernous, abandoned meatpacking plant. Under the buzz of a single halogen light, Dorian sat chained to a support pillar. He was battered, his tuxedo shirt torn to reveal bruised ribs, but his head remained unbored. Enzo Russo paced before him, swirling a glass of scotch, while Victor, the traitor, leaned against a crate, checking his watch. Derek Hogan stood nearby, clutching a crowbar and vibrating with nervous energy. "He's awake," Derek chirped. Enzo turned to Eustacia, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "Good. I wanted you to see this." He splashed the scotch into Dorian's open wounds. Dorian didn't flinch. He simply spat blood onto the concrete. "You have nothing, Enzo," Dorian rasped, his voice rough but unbroken. "You have a traitor and a warehouse. You don't have the city." "I have you," Enzo countered, drawing a gold-plated desert eagle. "And once I put a bullet in your head, the vain captains will scramble. Victor here will hand me the keys to the kingdom." "It's just business, Dom," Victor mumbled, looking at the floor. "Business," Dorian repeated. He locked eyes with Eustacia. There was no fear in his gaze, only a terrifying, calculating calm. He nodded subtly at the ruby necklace still draped around her neck. "You made one mistake, Enzo. You let her keep the jewelry." Enzo frowned. "It's a pretty trinket. I'll take it off her corpse." Dorian smiled, baring blood-stained teeth. "It's not jewelry. It's a Vane Industries prototype GPS tracker broadcasting on a military frequency. Leo isn't just a bodyguard. He's ex-special forces. And he's been listening to us for 10 minutes. Boom! The corrugated metal wall disintegrated. An armored SWAT truck smashed through, screeching to a halt in the center of the kill floor. Before the Russo guards could react, the side doors slid open. Leo and his tactical team unleashed a precise volley of suppressed fire. 3 guards dropped instantly. "Kill him!" Enzo screamed, raising his gun at Dorian. Dorian didn't wait. With a sickening pop, he dislocated his own thumb, sliding his hand free from the cuff. He whipped the heavy chain like a flail, striking Enzo's wrist and sending the gun skittering across the floor. Chaos erupted. Victor dove for cover, exchanging fire with Leo. Derek, panicked and out of his depth, turned his aggression toward the easiest target. "You're coming with me!" Derek shouted, raising the crowbar over Eustacia. Eustacia didn't scream. The fear that had paralyzed her for weeks hardened into survival instinct. As Derek lunged, she threw her body weight sideways, tipping the metal chair. She hit the floor hard, but the maneuver caused Derek's swing to miss, the crowbar clanging against the chair leg. As Derek stumbled, Eustacia kicked out, driving her heels into his knees. He buckled, falling face first. Eustacia frantically rubbed her zip ties against a jagged shard of glass on the floor, ignoring the stinging cuts on her wrists until the plastic snapped. Across the room, the Kings were brawling. Dorian had tackled Enzo, pinning the heavier man to the concrete, his hands tightening around Enzo's throat. "I told you I would burn your empire!" Dorian roared. A shot rang out. Victor had flanked them. He stood 10 feet away, leveling his pistol at Dorian's exposed back. "Goodbye, boss," Victor whispered. Bang! Victor jerked violently. A small red hole appeared in his forehead, and he crumpled to the floor. Silence fell over the warehouse. Dorian looked up from Enzo's unconscious body, then turned slowly. Eustacia stood there, her hands free, clutching Enzo's discarded Desert Eagle. She was breathing hard, the recoil still vibrating through her arms. But her aim had been true. She dropped the gun, her legs giving out. Dorian was there before she hit the ground. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her neck, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "It's over," he promised, his voice shaking with relief. "I swear to you, Eustacia. It's over." 6 months later. The sun set over Lake Como, painting the Italian sky in hues of violent orange and soft violet. Eustacia sat on the terrace of a private villa, watching Toby chase a golden retriever through the gardens. Her brother's hair had grown back thick and curly. The doctors had declared him in full remission 2 weeks ago. His laughter was the sweetest sound she had ever heard. The glass door slid open, and Dorian stepped out. He looked different. The darkness that had clung to him like a second skin in Chicago was gone. He still wore suits, but the tension in his shoulders had vanished. He had dismantled the illegal side of the Vane syndicate, transitioning fully into legitimate shipping and real estate. It had cost him half his fortune to get out, but he had paid it without blinking. He handed Eustacia a glass of wine and sat on the edge of her lounge chair. "Leo called," Dorian said, taking her hand and tracing the faint scar on her palm. "The merger is complete. We're officially out. No more territories, no more wars." "Do you miss it?" Eustacia asked. "I miss the adrenaline sometimes," Dorian admitted. "But then I look at you, and I look at Toby, and I realize I didn't have a life back then. I just had a death sentence." Eustacia smiled, leaning into his touch. "So what does a retired Mafia kingpin do with his time?" Dorian smirked, that dangerous, charming smirk that had started it all in a crowded nightclub. "I was thinking of buying a vineyard, or maybe just bothering my wife." "Wife?" Eustacia raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember a proposal." Dorian reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a box. He produced a single, flawless diamond set in a simple platinum band. "Eustacia Corvus," Dorian said, sliding off the chair onto one knee. The playfulness vanished, replaced by deep, abiding devotion. "You walked into hell for me. You saved my life and my soul. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my days making up for the first part." Eustacia looked at the ring, then at Toby playing in the grass, and finally at the man who had burned down his world to build her a new one. She slid the ring onto her finger. "Yes," she whispered. Then she laughed, pulling him in by the lapels. "But Dorian, if you ever spill a drink on me again, I'm firing you." Dorian laughed, capturing her lips in a kiss as the sun dipped below the mountains, sealing their story not with blood, but with golden light. And that is the story of Eustacia and Dorian, from a spilled glass of cognac to a shattered empire, proving that sometimes the most dangerous thing a man can do is fall in love. If this finale kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. What did you think of Eustacia taking the final shot? Let me know in the comments. And for more stories of forbidden romance and justice, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.